regarding,
third part.
we've heard various different things. I realize that we're pulling some things out of the sky, so forth. However, I think we can all assume that there will be some type of altitude limit imposed on us. To enforce the altitude limit, will the FAA send an investigator to a major glider contest or any contest that you might perceive as being a high altitude limit? And are you going to confirm the contestants are going too high and then hypothetically close the contest?
Well, I can say that there are no limits placed on the standard. So the FAA has not said to AMA, your standard must limit models to this or to that, and we have given no guidance. For all the operations that have been brought to us, we say, tell us how you do, we'll do that. Tell us how you do that safely. So when we talk about operations at 5,000, 6,000 feet, whatever, because we've seen soaring, and we understand that soaring is a hobby that many modelers enjoy. And we've never suggested that it should stop. We say, okay, what do you need to do that safely? What do you need to be at that altitude safely? Put it down in the standard. I'd really like to think if, from my perspective, leading up the oversight of this particular effort, if we've been successful at the end of this effort, then you all shouldn't see a change in what you're doing with this hobby. And on the flip side of that, those people out there that you all would say, he's giving us a bad name. That's crazy what he did. That was unsafe. That's the kind of thing that gives us a bad name. He won't be able to do that anymore. Then I think we've been really successful. So I think that would probably be my response. And no, we haven't looked to cap down anything.
Okay.
Could I add to that? Lynn had a pretty good comment at Joe Null on a similar question, and it was about speed limits, and there's not a policeman behind every sign, and I think that's when I volunteered to be the on-site regulator at the Joe Null, just because somebody's got to do it. But we had a demonstration. AMA has been really proactive in these meetings that we go work together, these workshops on standards development. And Lynn and the AMA team led up one in San Diego in August. And we got to go to Torrey Pines and see some operations of some really cool glider operations. And we got some demonstrations from some of your membership about how to do the sling gliders, which I got to do, and that was really cool. And see some operations at altitude, and there were some instances where manned aircraft were in the vicinity, and the method by which the pilots of those aircraft, those model aircraft, conducted themselves was really safe. It was appropriate. They removed themselves as a threat to that manned aircraft. They descended or they flew away from it. They didn't fly over people. They made sure that they didn't represent a risk to a hazard to the public. So when those pilots landed, Lynn's comment was, just write it down, because everything that you did was how you fly safely. And it was an awesome day at the glider field. So modelers know how to do it right. AMA has been leading the community for a long time. And if that includes what you want to do is at a specific altitude, Lynn has never said in these meetings the FAA wants the standard to say X or Y. Very consistent. We want you to document what you do and how you do it safely and present it to the FAA so that you can continue and flourish as you move forward. And that's been the statement all along.
Okay. A general time frame has been more or less described for the rulemaking process. What's a general time frame for the standards process? Rich, do you have any idea?
Sure, I can tell you what our objective and goal has been in doing the rule. the standards. I talked to you earlier about the rule-making process and where it's going to go between the notice of proposed rulemaking to final rule, well, public comment, then final rule, and then implementation. And implementation is the point where you now have to comply with the provisions and criteria in the rule, which we're guessing mid to late 2013. What we're trying to do with the standards is complete our process, submit them to the FAA for review and adoption, and actually get them approved as an alternate means of compliance so that on or before the implementation date for the rule, the standards are in place so that the modeling community can seamlessly move from the AMA, what we know now today as the AMA Safety Code, to the standards and never be subject to the rule unless you voluntarily or personally opt to operate under the rule and not use the standards. So our goal is to have the standards in place and implemented on or before the time that the rule is implemented.
Just one it's a nuance, but you will comply with the rule through an accepted standard in that case. So it isn't like within the rule it's going to have a provision that you can use a standard
In lieu of the rule.
To comply with the rule.
Yeah, as a way of complying with the rule. If you follow this.
So if the administrator, through whatever process the FAA reviews the rule and finds it acceptable as a means of compliance to the rule, then that is how you comply with the rule, which is the standard. It's a nuance on words, but very important.
Is the AMA the only organization working on developing standards for aero modeling?
At this time, it's the only one I'm aware of. Anybody, in any group, any body is able to develop a standard to present to the FAA for approval and acceptance. AMA is the one we went to and reached out to after their involvement with the ARC and as the Academy of Model Aeronautics to give the guidance to and work with on this effort to try to make that, I think, seamless movement of modeling. But I suppose technically anybody
We're not aware of anybody taking
could.
on any efforts, and if they are, then they haven't come forward.
They haven't
with
consulted us about it if another organization is developing a standard.
Okay. Rich, will the AMA alternate standards be available for use by non-AMA members?
Actually, it's probably better answered by James and Lynn because our knowledge of that comes from them. But my understanding is, and I'll let you guys weigh in on it, my understanding is the way the standards aspect of regulation works is that once a standard is adopted by and approved by the administrator, that standard can be used by anyone that wants to operate in that manner. Now, the standards will still be owned by AMA. We will have proprietary rights to that. So they will have to come to AMA to get those standards, but anybody that's interested in flying by this methodology will have access to the standards.
So I think some of the details are still being worked as exactly how AMA is going to deal with the standard. The FAA, when a standard is presented, has three choices. They can accept it as is, they can not accept it, or they can accept it with modification. So for instance, let's say that if part of the standard comes to the FAA and through the assessment we find that it's found that certain aspects of it really don't equal safe, then those could either just be rejected or those could be modified, and we would report to the public through various means of what we've accepted. So as an example, AMA may present the model standard, and the FAA would publicly state that we have accepted the model standard presented to us by AMA with the following changes or exceptions or modifications. And then that would be in a public record as to what the administrator or administrator's representatives doing the assessment and then on behalf of the administrator have found to be acceptable as a means of complying with 107. So we're going to point to something and we're going to say whether or not that is, as is, with modification, an acceptable means of complying with the rule. How AMA deals with the standard, we haven't necessarily had complete dialogue on that as internal to the FAA. It hasn't been presented yet, so.
Just for clarification though, once it's put in the Federal Register as an accepted means of complying with the rule, there's no one that could be denied access to that standard.
No, nor would anybody be required, which I think the question was, would you required to be an AMA member to use it, or no, that would, we wouldn't say these people can use it, those people can't use it. It's once it's been accepted by the FAA, then anybody, you know.
But just to put it in very plain terms, I don't want to belong to the AMA, but I want to use the standard. We cannot then go to them and say, no, you can't use that standard.
Correct.
We can go to them and say, yes, that standard will cost you X amount of dollars because we own it, and we're going to sell those rights to, you know, we're going to get compensation for your use of our proprietary intellectual property, but they would not be denied access to it.
Right.
Okay. How are you going to enforce the standards?
I'll volunteer. Now, I think that's the behind every speed limit sign. There's not a person there waiting to bust you. So we're not chomping at the bit to go out there and force, the new standard and the new rule. I think the nice thing will be that when those modeling operations, because we get letters from modelers, we get calls from, the AMA. This is not, we thought this was a very unsafe operation. Is there anything you can do to condemn that operation? Because certain operations that are unsafe out there do give modeling, a bad name, and we're aware of them. We hear about them just like you yourselves hear about them. And I think one of the good things is when unmanned aircraft flying is on the books, then when one of those instances occurs, then there is something, when brought to our attention, that can be done to stop unsafe operations. But I don't foresee, other than that, I don't foresee anybody being posted at flying sites ready to enforce something. That's not what we do now with manned aviation. We don't sit around at airports, ready to bust a pilot. We just don't do that. So.